What's up, everybody? Welcome to Magical Baddies, the realest podcast in all things mystical, magical, and spiritual. I'm Sophia.
I'm Leah.
And we're your hosts.
Yay. I'm super excited for today. Today's episode has been a very long time in the making, and it's the perfect day for it. So I'm really excited because today you get to meet Sophia, and you get to meet all of the things that Sophia does and where she came from and where she is going. To her knowledge at this point, we don't really know, but I'm
an enigma wrapped in a mystery.
Wrapped in a vest. That's Little Simpsons for you. So I first of all feel like when people see Sophia's brand, I don't know, I'm going to say that, like, when I first saw your, like, how you present yourself on Instagram, your website, to me felt like I'm immediately like encountering somebody who has like a wisdom of stuff. Like, this looks very rooted in stuff that I don't know about, but like has legitimately studied historically, all kinds of lineages that I know to be mystical, but that's as much as I know, because it's so far from what I know that I just assume like this is some Da Vinci Code shit that I don't understand. But then when you meet Sophia, one of the remarkable things about you is that you don't put your knowledge as like a wedge between you and other people. In fact, I think you do the opposite, which is to say, like, people can learn what I know. Like, anyone can learn what I know. And I think that's really, like, one, it's a key aspect of your personality and who you are, like accessibility. And accessibility isn't the right word because that makes it so political, but like everyday person in a sense. And then at the same time, having this incredibly elevated knowledge and an incredible rich, like, personal history within the worlds of magic and mysticism and spirituality. It's like the best of both worlds. And so I want people to see that today, even though they've already been seeing it this whole time in the podcast. I want people to like kind of get that deep look at what you do. So without further ado, Sophia, I wanted to start by asking you about your origin story, which is like a romantic way of asking you to talk about like where you came. Yeah, your lore. Like, where did you come from? How did you get your superpowers?
It's really funny because when Leah was here visiting me, I was like, oh yeah, where I grew up is only an hour away, and we talked about going. And that night I had a dream that we were in my house growing up, and she cried, and I was like, I don't think we should go.
Enough said. Let's go shopping instead.
Okay, so it's really interesting. I think that I was really lucky, and I know this is karmic, right? But like I'm really lucky that I was born into a very spiritually driven family. My grandmother was a root worker. Her grandmother before her was a root worker, and root worker is like, kitchen magic, working with herbs, speaking with spirits. And that was passed down generation. I don't know how many generations, but at least, I know Grandma Rose taught my grandma. And it's interesting because my grandmother was raised by her grandmother, and I was raised by my grandmother. And I just find that kind of interesting. So we grew up extremely poor in like backwoods Virginia. And I'm talking about like the areas where everything is abandoned. Like, I remember my husband was like, there are so many churches here. And I was like, there are more churches here than gas stations, but it's hard to find faith. It is like so ruined, so poor. Like, growing up, it was really interesting because I was the only person like me. Like, there was a couple of Mexican kids, but it was mostly white or black. And it was still very divided. There was KKK rallies up the street. My grandma would come out and she'd be like, y'all need to come inside. I'm not trying to find no dead babies. Which is terrible. But because me and my cousin is part Apache, we would just go play in the woods, and that could be dangerous at times, you know. So it's weird because I grew up, I think when you look at my branding, it's very deep seated in nostalgia. But when I grew up in the 90s, it felt like I was growing up in the like 60s. Is,
Yeah.
you know, like you would go to the gas station and a white guy would still call an older black man boy. And
Yeah.
so like growing up, I kind of always felt like a loner. Like it was bad enough that my parents gave me up when I was little and my grandmother came and took me. But even within my own family, I didn't feel like I belonged. And being biracial, I never felt like I belonged. And like living in a town where there's only black and white, you don't feel like you belong. And it's interesting now, just even as an adult, like people still look at me and they're like, they can't really place me. And I think that's like part of my thing, right? Like you were just saying, like I seem like this one thing, but I am this other. And
Yeah.
that's totally fine. But my grandmother, I think what like also really anchored that feeling too is because she was a root worker, because we talked to spirits, we were always taught you don't tell anybody about that. Like
Yeah.
that was just the heritage of what we did, the tradition we did. My grandma would always say, like, I wouldn't hug anybody, just anybody, because you don't know who wants a piece of your hair, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, like sea salt in front of the doors, and you know, there's a lot of that growing up. Like we always had chickens, and certain chickens died during certain times. You know, there's a lot of blood magic growing up. Anyways, so that was my step into the world. And um because I grew up through a lot of, even though it's kind of wonderful, right? Like you can fantasize, and I idolize like this idea of growing up in a magical family, but we were under the poverty line. Nobody in my family graduated high school. Um, there was a lot of abuse. Like my grandparents, when they had me, kept me safe for the most part. But my uncles were extremely abusive. They lived with us because they never left home. And when my mom and dad were doing their thing, they would use me as a bartering tool, and there was a lot of abuse there. So it was extremely abusive. And so I kind of lived in my own world. And when you deal with some heavy traumas like I've dealt with, like being locked up in a cage when you're a kid, or locked in an attic, or left home alone, or you know, sexual abuse, there's a lot of stuff. um your brain turns that stuff off, right? And
Mhm.
what I remember is being kind of inside of myself. And when you can't trust the world around you, I think you have to find something in order to have faith to get through it. And now not
Mhm.
everybody is like that, but I think I was lucky enough to like figure that out. And the thing that worked for me was spirit. Like when I was a kid, it was really hard for me to understand because it's terrifying. You hear voices, you feel people sitting on your bed, you know things before, you know, like we lived in every house we lived in was haunted, but we lived in one house where like a woman would come speak to my uncle every night, and like I knew the
Wow.
story of the little girl that lived in our room. And yeah, it was just like
Yeah.
really crazy like that. And so it was terrifying for me, but there would be times where there would be like a gentler voice that would like explain things to me, and I had to trust it,
Yeah.
because I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through a lot of what I went through if I didn't trust it.
Yeah.
um but it was terrifying, right? And so like
Yeah.
as I go through my teens, I shut it off. And I'm just in a really bad situation all over again. And I moved to Pennsylvania with my mom and my stepdad. And I make a friend in high school, and I meet her mom, and Millie ends up being like my adopted mother. Like I lived with them. Like
Mhm.
they're my sisters, like really close to her. And the first time I met her, I'll never forget. We were in the car, and Millie like looks up in the back rear view mirror, and she's like, "Sophia, what do you see?" And the girls are like, Mom, stop being rude. And I looked at her and I go, I see everything. And she was like, I knew she was one of us. And it was like, it was really cool because, like, you know, I would walk across 2 cornfields and 3 miles over to get to that house. And I would like live with them for the most of the time. And Millie, so her mother, she's a New Yorican, and her mother was raised in Santeria, and like she grew up going to like these gatherings. So she understood a lot of it. But Millie taught me about the tarot. She's the first person to teach me about Akashic records. My first Sylvia Brown book ever was through her. You know, like I will never forget this. I remember she woke up one day and handed me a piece of paper, and I really wish I still had it. And it was this whole channeling that she did from Archangel Michael to me. And, you know, I had dreamt about angels when I was a kid. Like I would see St. Augustine a lot, who's a douchebag, but whatever. I would see Jesus, Mother Mary, but I didn't grow up in the church. And living in the South, it's a culture. Like it's not like it's
like
more than
dogma.
religion, right? And so like feeling like an outsider, and then on top of that, not being attached to a church was weird. And I remember as a kid, I was like, Grandma, how come we don't go to church? And she was like, God is in nature, and that's why I spend every day outside. And that's what she said to me. So like when I was a kid, I was like, that's stupid. Now I understand what, because it's so ingrained in what I do. But you know, Millie taught me all of these things, and she like really opened me up to, like, she used to tell me like, let go of the fear, let go of the fear. And when I was younger, I like didn't understand what that meant. I was like, how am I going to let go of the fear? I'm so scared. But she was really encouraging me to open up to my gifts. And she was so cool. Like she would like switch into different like accents, and like it was just so cool to see somebody be weird about it and be open about it. Not just within the family. So it helped encourage me a little bit, because I grew up in such a closed off family. Like we don't talk, not just about our secrets, we don't talk about what we do, we don't, you know. And you know, I'm sure that's has a lot to do with like I said, our heritage. But Millie was a little bit more open, and I think she came from like the botanicas, and you know, where it's like it's a little okay around certain people. So
and there's like community,
there's community around
it a little bit more open.
Totally. And you know, my grandparents, we didn't have family friends. Like now that I think about it, we didn't grow up with like, oh, blah 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 came to our, we did not have family friends. We were very isolated. So that was like an interesting switch. And yeah, I mean, Millie really encouraged all of that, and helped me kind of reconcile a little bit the abuse I had been through, and helps me learn to trust people just a little bit more. I mean, that takes time, but but it was cool. You know, I didn't get back to the Akashic records until my 30s. But so I basically, like, from there I moved to Philly. I definitely go through a manic and mental episode. I was really addicted to drugs. And I was weaning off of them, and I was really struggling with what was real and what was not real. And at the same time, I was also seeing a lot of things. A lot of things were like coming through. And of course, like my energy was just attracting things that were not fun, you know? And so when I was in Philly, I had a dream, and I dreamt I was in like the Wild West, like it was like empty. And this man was talking to me, and he takes me into this movie theater, and he's like, he's like, Sophia, are you here for good? And this other man who looks just like him, but I could feel he was like the devil or something like that. He was like, no, being bad is so good. You can get so much done. And I was like, no, I'm here for good. And then that guy was like, are you sure? And I was like, I'm definitely sure. And so then he disappears, and Harry says, I want you to go to South Street. And then he shows me the building. He was like, I want you to ask for Tony. The next day, I go to South Street. I see Harry's occult. So I walk in and I walk up to the guy and I'm like, hey, is Tony doing readings? And he's like, Tony's not here. And this woman who's like she's doing a fixed candle. She looks over at me and she like looks back and she's like, Tony just walked in. And she turns around and she's like, comes back and she's like, go upstairs with Tony. And he's like, he's not even working today. And she looked at him and looked at me and she's like, Metatron's with her. He's working today. And I'd never heard of who that was. I didn't know what the fuck. And like, I'm already still like, this is weird. But I go upstairs with him. And it's so cool. It's this really old building. And the lore around Harry's occult is that Harry sold his soul to the devil so that the occult shop could exist for 100 years. And on the 100th year, it was taken down. So that was really interesting. So anyways,
wow.
we go upstairs. There's like a Yoruban hoodoo practitioner doing his thing. And we go to the back and Tony sits me down and he's like telling me this whole thing. And it was really cool interaction. And I left there being like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
But he was like, I remember him telling me that I had so many lights, almost like a candelabra around my head, and that I was with this being and that my guides were ginormous. And it just was so beyond my understanding. And it took me a really long time to get it. But I was hooked with Harry's after that. I never worked there, but I hung out there. And you don't want to work in a place like that. Like if you know any of these like straight up like occult, like old school occult apothecaries or the old school botanicas, it's got a lot of energy. You just like, you don't want that. And then like the practitioners on each other, it's like a whole thing.
Yeah.
But you know, I love tea. So I love the drama of it all. And I got to know everyone. And then like everyone would like teach me outside or teach me inside. And you know, like I had some amazing mentors, like everybody knew me. I would go in and just hang out. And, you know, from there, I was practicing, you know, a lot of hoodoo centric, like candle magic, like clearing. I mean, the best clearings I know are Santeria based. It's a lot of fire. I got kicked out of a house for that once. But, yeah, I was practicing heavily in ritual and in magic and working with deities and all of that. And then like, you know, I just had life. I was a single mom. I, you know, wanted to work and figure my life out. I didn't want to become my mom. You know, I was just like, but spirituality was always in the background. You know, I would like invite these people over. They would give me readings. I'd work with candles, you know, whatever. But it was just always in the background until like, I think it was like 30, 31. And I told my husband, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know that if it wasn't for spirit, I wouldn't have gotten this far in life. And I just want to show other people that if they can trust their intuition and trust spirit, that they can have so much more. And that's all I know. And we were sitting at this bar in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. I was drinking a pina colada at a place that I don't need to be drinking a pina colada. And I was just like, I just have to get this out. And he was like, all right, whatever you need to do. So it was like, I started doing it professionally, but it was like kind of a back and forth. And I was still having a hard time putting myself out there. Because of the programming I have. And I think that's still like very indicative of who I am now, right? Like even you were like Leah's my best friend. And she's like, I don't really know what you do.
I don't know.
I'm like, I think I'm very open. Maybe it's just like being charismatic. Like be like, look over here, but don't look over here.
It's a different kind of magic. It's
Yeah.
magician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a hard time with that. And then, I would go back into the beer business and then back
Yeah.
to doing that. And then like 2020 hit, and that, that was the major switch.
It
And that's when
changed everything.
it changed everything. Yeah.
So I want to ask about dreams,
Mhm.
because dreams are, from my observation, one of the massive conduits of how you receive information and guidance and it. I want to know, I'd love to hear like what your history with your own dreaming has been like, and then how have dreams like played a role in your life today?
Yeah. I don't know. It's so hard to explain because it's just so natural for me.
Yeah.
I think on some level, right? Like we're many bodies, right? And we're
Hmm.
many intelligences. And I think
Hmm.
my intellect in my human body, my emotion and mental might be like closed up a little bit, but there's a level, a soul level that is wide open,
Yeah.
like when I was younger. And so when you're at that level, I think that probably interchanges with that dimensional work where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're going to give you what you need.
Yeah.
And to some degree, I think that, when we have, when you have dreams and you're like, I know something crazy happened, but I don't remember it. I think to some degree, they keep the intellect out of it and give it to the rest of us that we need it where it needs to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
But I think that being so fearful of like all the voices and spirits and all that when I was a kid, I'm an older soul on that level. And so I could receive information. And so when I was younger, the things that I would receive was always when people were going to die, which is fun.
Yeah.
And when people are going to get pregnant, those were like the first big ones that I would always get. And then
Yeah.
I would also see like angelic beings. Um, but that was like so long ago. Those are the main ones that I would get. As I got
Hmm.
older, so one of the more prolific things that have happened in my life is my best friend was murdered, and her body was hidden, and so she was just missing for a really long time. She had just had a baby, and it's really unfortunate. She asked me to be the godmother. It was it was a really hard time. Like I was like 18, and I remember being so fucking mad um because I just thought sh like she took off. She had to have taken off. There's no way, something happened to her. And she started coming to me in my dreams. And she started like showing me what happened. She showed me exactly what happened that night, which turned out that they got into a fight. He threw her. She was very tiny. She was like 5 foot, like very small. He threw her against the wall. It killed her. And then she showed me the whole thing. And then I remember my son's father woke up one day in a sweat, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "Courtney came into my dreams, and he hadn't been treating me right. And I guess
Yeah.
she was like showing him her dead self. And she was like,
Mm.
"What are you doing to
Oh
her?"
my gosh.
Yeah. And um, she just kept coming back. She would tell me things that were happening, things she was on the other side, showing me her world. And I remember the day they found her. That night I had a dream, and we were at this, it was so beautiful. It was like like was it midnight summer's dream or what? It's like kind of like dark, but like the lights were like
Yeah.
the stars
Oh,
were just,
Midsummer Night's Dream.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
Like,
like the
yeah, yeah.
creek was just like you could hear it. And I was
Yeah.
standing by the creek, and I was like, "Courtney, they found your body." And she was like, "I know, I'm really sad." And I was like, "Why are you so sad?" And she's like, "It is not going to be good." And it wasn't. It was awful. Like there was a court case. I had to go for the defense, which fucking sucked. Her mom obviously never let me see the little girl ever again. And, that's not my fault, but it is what
Yeah.
it is. It was like, it was just really shitty. So having that spirit like walk me through it, I think like made me more open to that world, even more so than I was before. And so I started realizing in dreams, I'm an extremely lucid dreamer. I've always been
Yeah.
a lucid dreamer, but I started taking action in my dreams and like telling myself I can do this, telling myself I can do that. Like,
Yeah.
and then like really training myself. Like I would like fly and I'd be like, you're not flying anymore, fly, fly, fly,
Yeah.
fly. Like, doing stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then I got to a point where I was like, when I get scared, deal with it in dreams.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if something's scaring me, don't fly away. Like go deal with it. And
Yeah.
once that happened, it was just like it was almost like a challenge. Um and I just started, I don't know, I just like always get information and I've had people ask me if I'm ever going to teach like a dream class, and I know everyone says I will, but like I honestly don't know how I would do it because it
Right.
comes so naturally to me, because
Yeah.
the stuff that comes through is wild, like this whole thing. And I like went to my acupuncturist and I was like, my dad threw my spleen at me in a dream, like can we look at that? Like or like dreaming in other languages, or just knowing when things are going to
Yeah.
happen, or astrology. I'm not an astrologer, but astrology comes in a lot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm always open to it, and I think I've gotten to a point where I've kind of perfected the hypnagogic state. I'm really good at
Yeah.
being right in between sleep and awake, and I think kids will do that to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's when all the wild stuff always happens. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the more I trust, the more
Yeah.
and it's like micro macro, right? Like the more I trust here and in this world, the more it happens there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so interesting because that was one of the striking things when I first started, getting to know you, was how not just vivid, but how like literal, not literal, that's also not the right word. Like, I don't know, like how robust your dreams are, but not in a fantastical way. Like when I hear you report back on your dreams there, it's not like you're demonstrating some kind of like Freudian psyche phenomenon. It's like, I mean, sometimes it is, but often it is like you're an open channel for something to speak through you or connect with you in your dreams. And it's just really impressive and incredible. Um, okay. So I wanted to bring that in because one of the things that like I wish people could know about you is how you'll just be like, oh my God, look at this thing I dreamed. And it'll be like some image. And then you discover like a month later, like, oh, it was actually like, carved onto like the sepulcher of Mary or whatever, and like, how did you do that? Oh, what? Um, but yeah, it's, you make these things, these esoteric things that come to you through your dreams, not weird, like not, you're not like so in another world that you're unrelatable. And I think some people do that with their dream work and it's hard to handle.
Sophia, she's just like us.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that I've always struggled with the idea of feeling smart or sounding smart. My dad
Yeah.
always, growing up, I was always told, especially being like half Asian, it's like you're never smart enough. You
Yeah.
just and you sound stupid and whatever. And for me, I've always loved history and I've
Yeah.
always loved researching because I was always in my own world. And so like reading normal books did nothing for me. Like
Yeah.
reading like, Amelia Bedelia, I could not get into that. But you gave me
Yeah.
like the history of the world and I'm set in stone. Like I remember in 6th grade, my dad bought me one Christmas gift and it was the history of the world. And he was like, because it was $90. And I loved that book. Like I
Yeah.
seeped in that book. And I think that I really hated the way people, I just don't like authority or any sense of being anything. Oh guys, welcome. Or any sense that somebody is better. I do
like
not like
hierarchy.
I do not like it. And I think that there is a part of me that is definitely like, either you take it serious or you don't.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And but I think that that is very different than being gatekeepy or being like, I'm better than thou, or like whatever, you're not even at this level, like you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like I think back to like when I was learning at the Botanica or at the occult shop, and I knew what I had. I just hadn't developed it yet. I didn't have it reined in. So like, you know, there was a couple of people that were like, she's not ready for this, whatever, she won't understand. But then there was a couple that are like, yeah, we got to teach her.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's how I look at it with my students too, or like people that I interact with. And, you know, you and I had this conversation when you were like, I'm so impressed by how serious you take it, because I often don't give off that that energy, because I'm not trying to do that. But like, if you want to talk shop, I can talk shop for sure. But like, I just don't see the point in it.
Well, I do want to talk shop, so let's fucking go.
Let's go.
So I want to talk about like where the formal study of the angelics and then like the Western mystery traditions come into your realm in a very serious way. Like, where does it come in as like, oh, this is what I need to pursue? When does that happen?
So when I was in my 20s, I was, you know, just dabbling in candle magic and stuff like that. And I remember acquiring a book about the mystical Kabbalah, and I still have it. And I have no idea where I got it from. And when I started reading it, like, I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I was like, this is not going to get me my, you know, my person or whatever. I don't need this right now. My job that I'm trying to like manifest. And I really truly believe that the universe or fate is honestly like, you've got to flirt with her and she flirts with you. And I feel like she was like flirting it, right? I always feel like the things, like even like when I met my husband, he was just kind of around me until we actually met. Like it was like sliding doors. And I really feel like that happens to us in the spiritual realm too. It's like teasing, you know? So back to dreaming. I had a series of dreams where I was dreaming in Hebrew, and I don't speak Hebrew, and I dream in other languages pretty normally. But but this struck me because it was pretty consistent and happened a lot. And I was also writing in Hebrew, and I was understanding it. And then they were telling me, when they were dictating to me, like the person in the dream, they were like, remember this when you wake up and write it. And so I would. And I remember having one particular dream before my grandmother passed away, where this woman was wearing all black, and she looked at me and like went like this to her nose. And I told my grandmother about it, and she was like, that was my grandmother. And I was like, why was that your grandmother? And she was like, because my grandmother spoke Yiddish, and she always wore all black, and she scared the living piss out of me. I always called her a witch.
Wow.
And so she came from the Ukraine during, I think it was like right after the pogroms. And at that time, also Romani people were also being executed. And so a lot of, you see like this wave of Jewish people and Romanis like migrate towards the UK and the US. And my grandmother was 13 years old, gets on a boat in Budapest, meets my grandfather, and then, or my great grandmother meets my grandfather and marries him.
Wow.
And comes to US, which is insane. Right. And they both spoke Yiddish, because Romanis, I guess, and Jews always had some sort of relationship, and it's also dialectal. So they spoke Yiddish. And at the time, like a lot of people, you see this in Hollywood too, like a lot of Jewish people like took American names, didn't learn their language. They wanted to like be very American because of what was going on. So anyways, so I was like texting with a friend back and forth, and we were really in on this Egypt stuff. And I see a picture of this. I actually posted it on my Instagram not too long ago in a video of this steel, Egyptian steel that was being excavated from the sea, from the sunken city of Heliopolis. Heliopolis? I don't know how to say it. But anyways, so when my grandmother, right before she passed away, I'm in Richmond, seeing her. I know she's going to die in the next day or two. And I see the lost city in Egypt at the Richmond Art Museum. And I'm like, I gotta go. This is the same. There's something here. So I go. I don't feel anything, but I'm just looking at it and I'm like, this is crazy, right? This is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So when I come back, I'm dreaming in numbers a lot. Numbers are really pointing at me. And so I start remembering like, oh, the tree of life has numbers on it. And so I start like tracing back and forth, like, what does this mean? What direction am I in? And like, Minority Report. And then I decide I'm going to seep into it a little more and learn mystical Kabbalah. During that time, I keep having dreams, and they keep talking to me about the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, and over again, they were like, you need to do this. So I do the research, and at this time, I'm like studying at 22 Teachings. But I'm also like researching like Rosicrucianism, and the Belle Epoque from France, where there's like the Rose Cross, and there's all these different sectors of mysteries traditions, right? And it's like that's exactly what the Golden Dawn is. They don't have a crux on the Western mysteries tradition, which everyone seems to think. They're just another society. And I start looking at Madame Blavatsky and Edgar Cayce, and the line of Akashic records and Hinduism, and all of it is like kind of like molding in a very specific time and place. And I start diving in deep. Now, at the same time, this is around the time I have Esme. And before, so Esme, when she was born, she was in the NICU for 10 days because she stopped breathing. Before she was born, I had a dream where Gabriel came to me, and then another one where Michael came to me. And then they both showed me, I was yelling at the nurses and the doctors, and I was like, she's turning blue. She's turning blue. Do something about it. And they were like, just pray to us. And then there was one where I see Gabriel's face, and it's so intense, and just like this crazy white light. It's so intense. I tell him, or them, I tell them to stop. I was like, my heart's going to explode. I need you to stop. And it disappears. So the nurses come in. Oh, they take me into this room. I have agoraphobia. So I asked them to put me in a room with lots of windows, and they give me like, it's just all windows. And just one after another, it's dragonflies and birds hitting each other over and over, like hitting the window. And we're like, oh, her friends are here, because we had a lot of bird activity at our house while I was pregnant. Because that's me. And another interesting thing was we had a robin lay eggs right around the time that I was pregnant and about to give birth. So every day I would check on them. And one day I went in, and a giant, it wasn't a crow, it was a raven, it was huge, was under my awning on top of the nest, looking into my house directly at me. And so subsequently I'm like, okay, I have to work with the angelic realm. There's something to this. And then I also figure out, because of dreams, Odin is like really present in not just my life, but Steve's as well. And my husband like only says he doesn't believe in anything, but and ravens are part of Odin. So I feel that not only were the angels letting me know that this was gonna happen, that Odin was also warning me.
Yeah.
But when the nurse came in, she was like, she turned purple, she stopped breathing. It was like almost the same words. And it just like, it also was at the same time I was taking my bhakti practice. I was taking my bhakti teacher training, and my heart was just like broken, like so open.
Yeah.
And I am not one to ask for a lot of help. And that was the time when people were texting me. I was like, please pray. Can you please send Reiki? Can you please, like, I was so open to asking for help because this was so much more than me. And that was like really the first time I truly felt community, was like being so open to be like, hey, I need your help. My baby needs your help.
Yeah.
And so through the Western mysteries tradition and through Kabbalah, like I didn't know at the time that there was an angelic section to this, until I started digging deeper into like Enochian magic and some of the invocations. One in particular, the lesser, the LBRP, the banishing ritual of the pentagram.
Yeah.
And so something was like, okay, wait, there's something here. Because everything I looked at when I looked into angels was like so new agey.
Yeah.
So like I saw this being full of light
Like
and whatever.
churchy
and
almost. Yeah.
So churchy, so new agey. There was like nothing that made sense to me. And I had this very specific memory since I was a kid that I remembered there was this war of the angels. And I would ask people who worked with angels, and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, even at the occult shop, they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I was just like searching for like the deep cut shit. I was like, it has to be here somewhere, you know? And then I started diving in deep with Metatron. And then I was like, oh, Metatron was Enoch. Oh, Book of Enoch. Oh, and then like, that's how I found this. Now I had like read visions of Ezekiel, I'd read Revelations. It was all so over my head. I just didn't get it at the time. But as I was dabbling in the Western mysteries tradition, which I loved because it was very historical, I was also being drawn towards the Akashic records. And I, taken a Linda Howe class. I worked with Helen, and I remember the first time I felt the Akashic records, I was like, oh, this is like, whoa, like this is different than being psychic. But it felt so limited. And I turned it off to like figure out how that all mixed up. But towards the end, like I'd say in the last couple of years, looking back at the Enochian magic, looking back at, which I'll get into, but looking back at Revelations, visions of Ezekiel, Enoch, particularly book 3, the Zohar, through an Akashic lens, was a game changer.
Well, okay, so let me stop for just a second, because we said a lot of things that I think people don't know about at all, and I don't know about too. So we talked about Enochian magic as like one of the first things that you like learned, like to like studied in a way, but then you from there you started looking at other texts like the Zohar. So okay, so what I know of Enochian magic is that it's related to John Dee, who is like a Renaissance mystic and philosopher, whatever. But he was like
Elizabethan.
Elizabethan, but he was not. Is that 16th century?
Yes.
Okay.
Late 16th century.
Okay, but he was also like a misfit socially, and like it wasn't a harmonious path to have this divine channeled knowledge. It was not like reflected in like a comfortable living situation, essentially. And I wonder like why that, because when I think about what you do and like what you've studied, that feels very small compared to like the bigger things that you've moved on to. Like that feels very small and limited compared to studying Kabbalah or Akasha in general.
Yeah.
And I wonder how it was like a stepping stone, or like how it resonated and then you moved from there. Like, can you talk about that at all? Or like what even it is? Like, what is Enochian magic for people that don't know?
Sure. So to be clear, I'm doing all of this side by side. Like I'm doing the Akashic record stuff, and I'm doing like the Western mystery tradition, and I'm diving into I'm going into both of them side by side. When I start kind of searching around the Western mysteries tradition, I'm looking for specifically angelic works. So of course the first one I see is Enochian magic. I know who John Dee is because I have a crazy affinity for everything War of the Roses through Tudor England. Like I totally know a normal amount of that history. And yeah, John Dee was a misfit, but so were many of the alchemists during that time. Scientists in general were a little strange. They didn't really get them. And also you have to remember that science was opposing the church at the time. And you know, in England, there's a lot of, even though during the Elizabethan times, it's settled a little bit, there's still a lot of, you know, the Huguenots and the Catholics, and it's all through Europe. So he's already like out of bounds. He's like the court astronomer or astrologer, but technically astronomer as well. And Elizabeth has to like fight to keep him there, but he's the one she goes to for everything. He was also her spy, which is really interesting.
Did they have an affair?
No. Yeah. He was like much, much, much older than her.
So what? They were nasty.
She was a queen. She could get whatever she wanted.
Exactly. No. That's what I'm saying.
No, but she trusted him a lot.
Yeah.
And it was often questioned in the court why she favored him so much, but like that was her astrologer. She was not, I mean, even down to like the Armada, when the Spanish Armada came to England, she didn't make any moves without him. So she contributed a lot of what he said to her to the win, because he was the one that said that there was going to be a storm. So anyways, so he works with this guy, Kelly. His first name's escaping me. Edward Kelly?
Edward Kelly.
Yeah, Edward Kelly.
I did a little Wikipedia before this.
Edward Kelly. He's a strange guy, but he's a psychic. So John Dee has no psychic abilities, but he's a mathematician. He's an alchemist. He's an astrologer. He knows there's something here. He was also obsessed with the Book of Enoch. And at the time, they had not found the Book of Enoch. That wasn't found until like the 1700s, maybe 1800s. Oh, wow. So he was obsessed with the lore of it. Edward Kelly was like, I can channel angels, no problem. So they do all of this work. They create, he has two systems. The one I actually like is the Heptarchia. That works more with like the angelic planets, which would be called the princes, is what they're called. And then there's Enochian magic, which is another level of angels. So there's many levels of angels. Basically what they would do is they would specifically, like, the table needed to be made of this wood, and you have to have an orb of this like crystal. And like it was a lot of all of these things to rectify our reality so that they could channel or see these beings. And what I didn't, as much as I feel like the channeled stuff was good, I don't feel all of that is needed. And what I did realize, and I've had this conversation with our friend Shannon, a lot of ceremonial magicians are not psychic. Right. In fact, they like to be like, it's a science. And look, I'm down with science too. I go to doctors, but I think that there is a part of the mindset that science is better than
Yeah.
intuition
Yeah.
or psychic ability.
Yeah.
Also, if we really want to get down to it, alchemists were the leads in before scientists. And even in science, there has to be some level of hope or faith before
Yeah.
you can actually get the answer.
Right.
So now in times,
Yeah.
like we like to have it analyzed, we like to have an answer to give us the hope. And
Right.
whatever you need to trick yourself into believing, fine. That is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that ultimately to get that answer, you need faith and intuition, because
Yeah.
intuition is what leads us to ingenuity.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the C word, colonialism, that puts scientific knowledge above all other knowledge systems. So yeah, and you're coming up against that. And I think that's like a really interesting, it says a lot about your own pursuits and how like magic in and of itself has not been enough for you because you are so connected to an even bigger like realm
Mhm.
that that I don't want to say defies magic, but magic is like inclusive of it. And that's kind of like what the Akasha is. And I think that's what Kabbalah does too. It's like it tries, from my very basic knowledge, like to help people understand the mysteries of God and the universe, or existence. Whereas magic, which I'm not talking shit on magic at all, I do magic myself, but like it's like using the tools available to construct a reality that is desired or preferred.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we even had this conversation where you're like, we talked about being the intersection of magic and mysticism. And mysticism is the relationship to God.
Yeah.
Magic is our relationship to nature. So, if
Yeah.
you can be the intersection of that, then what happens to your reality?
Yeah.
And though, up and through my 30s, I'd always worked with magic. I've always had some kind of connection. And
Yeah.
I can't be just one or the other. And also for me,
Yeah.
I coming back to authority, I there's no way this is all we have. There's no
Right.
way this is it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, I feel like you see a lot of people online, they're like the great remembering. Blah.
Yeah.
But here's what it is that we remember because we grab a book from the past and it resonates. But how do
Yeah.
we evolve that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Like, why does it matter if you remember it or not? Well, how does it apply to your life? Like, yeah.
right. So, like, I think the remembering is going through the stuff that you learned in the past lifetimes and bringing it here.
Yeah.
And, so as I got deeper in the Western mysteries tradition, it was so locked in on tarot and psychic and astrology. And it was just so limiting.
Yeah.
And I always felt more drawn to Judaic Kabbalah anyway. So I
Yeah.
made the switch because I read something somewhere and it like really struck me. It was this like, these are ideas and philosophies and mysticism coming from a culture that is
Mm.
that is it's soaked in the culture, and even within the
Yeah.
culture, the Judaic culture, not everybody is down with Kabbalah and
Yeah.
Merkabah.
Yeah.
It's seeped in the culture. But then you have these people that colonialize it. They grab it and they're like, well, this is good. But like, actually, what they mean is this. But they
Yeah.
have no understanding of the basis of the culture.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've talked to you, like, I've heavily considered converting because I want to be seeped in it more because it speaks. I've not had anything outside of maybe Carl Jung that speaks so deeply to my
Yeah.
soul as Judaic mysticism.
So that's actually one of my questions. Like, why does this lineage resonate with you? That was about Kabbalah. That was one of my questions for you.
Yeah, I think that it just feels like home, and that's the only way I
Mm.
can answer
Yeah.
it. It
Which
just
is
feels
truly
right.
what resonance is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
I
yes.
I think that, I was talking to my therapist about it and I was like, it makes me a little nervous to like put myself out as like a Kabbalist, not with a Q, and
Yeah.
to be studying Merkava, because typically that is something that you study from word of mouth. um like you get that from somebody else, and I get some of it from somebody else, but um I was like, I'm just scared. And she's like, why? And I was like, well, I'm not Jewish. And she's like, yeah, you are. And like, it did not even register in my mind because of the online system, you know. And
Yeah.
I've talked to one of my students, and she's Jewish, and she's like, that's why I take your classes, because you always seep it back there. But I think it's just, I think also being alone for so much of my life and trying to figure out what community means. And like, we've had this conversation in our section about community. We're
Yeah.
like always preached community, this, that, the
Yeah.
other. Um, and it's like really hard for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But as I study, like, you know, Judaic mysticism and the culture, because you have to study the culture with
Yeah.
it, there's like a sense of community that I'm like, I want to recreate this. I
Yeah.
want to be a part of this. Like, there's, I don't know,
Yeah.
it just feels like home. And honestly, it has been the most potent parts of like my practice and my research with the angelics. I just got six
Yeah.
cents. But I
Yeah.
mean, for the listeners, I've given Leah a prayer, and it was wild. Like, it's, I mean, it's the stuff that it resonates. Like, everything else is like, you have to be perfect, and you have to do this for this many days, and you have to, and it's like, no, I don't. I don't
Yeah.
have to do any of that. Like,
Yeah.
doing like the you know, the lesser and the higher of Solomon, like, it just didn't, I'm like, there's too many steps.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I think a lot of that, the steps, is based in fear, and it's
Yeah.
not based in honoring. Because if we were
Mm.
honoring it, we would trust that there's nothing to fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that takes time.
That does take time. Yeah. Um, you said, okay, you said, give me a prayer. What, for people that don't understand what that means, what are you talking about?
So, here's how I feel about the Akashic records, guys.
Well, my
So
next
I
question was, how do you reconcile or marry this lineage with the Akasha, if at all?
yeah, I think what people don't understand about the Akasha, or the Akasha records, I don't like the term Akashic records because it's way too colonial for me. And before you and I were friends, I said that to Helen. I was like, it's colonized and I don't like it. It's
Yeah.
too limiting.
Yeah.
Um, the Akasha gives you a lens. It's like,
Mm.
once you see through that lens, you realize it's so much more than just grabbing information. It's not a library. Like,
Yeah.
period. It is not.
Yeah.
And when you have that lens, it will consistently, and it will always challenge you to look at new perspectives and challenge what you think you know. And if
Yeah.
you are willing to be flexible enough, it is life changing.
Yeah.
And I think people put too much on this, like, I need to know, I need to have the right message, I need to, like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. So
Readership. They put too much like weight on readership.
yeah, which is why I'm doing my own Akashic readership in
Yeah.
2024. But right, it changes you as a person. And it's interesting, like, even in my conversations with Leah, like, we can talk about stuff and have very strong opinions about things, and then be like, but you know, and then we can
Yeah.
have the Akashic ones as
Yeah.
well. It doesn't mean you have to change how you think, which I
Right.
think that spirituality does a lot. Like, you
Yeah.
have to have an idea of how you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So marrying these two, it really gave me an Akashic lens to see things from a more pliable and
Yeah.
expansive point of view. And so
Yeah.
when I go back and look at these books, you have to remember that these books were written by people that were trying to have a cryptic message, because it's not meant for everybody,
Yeah.
right? And so when I have this Akashic perspective, I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And it really, it's like reading the Zohar when I first got into the Western mysteries tradition, and then reading the Zohar, you know, last year, night and day.
Yeah.
um I I get what they're saying.
What
And
is the Zohar for people that don't know?
so the Zohar is like one of the major books in Kabbalah. It's written by a guy in Spain. It's kind of like the book for people that study Kabbalah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think both of them are looking for, I think the confusion here is that in Western mystery traditions or in a lot of magic, we're looking to ascend or
Yeah.
we're looking to change everything. And it's one or the other. Like, give me something that I can have or get me out of here.
Yeah.
And I think that when you marry these traditions and you're looking at it from a different point of view, than like, this is a science, this is what I want to change, whatever. You're looking at it from an Akashic perspective and you're looking at it from a historic perspective. You're looking at it like, I can clear my channel, which clearing my channel I got from my teacher training in Bhakti. Clear my channel and act as a, not a vessel for spirit, but a conduit.
Yeah.
And I can work with them and they can work with me. And that co-collaborative aspect, I mean, I learned from Helen, that's Akashic.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have figured that out without the Akashic.
Right.
So marrying those two things has really shifted everything for me.
I love how you say that, because I think for the people that I have come up with in the Akashic training and the Akashic world, meaning the people that were my peers when I studied it, and my peers getting trained in it, and my, like in the realm of my Akashic world, which is not the same as everyone's Akashic world. The people that had great success were able to blend the Akashic perspective with whatever they do. Mm-hmm. And the people that I find have struggled, when I say struggled, I mean, I'm just gonna use the word struggled. When the people that have struggled are the ones that wanted this access point or this knowledge system or whatever. It's not a knowledge system, wanted this perspective, wanted the Akashic training to transform their own lives and so there's like a subtext there of like, those people still see themselves as powerless, not co-creators, not a part of everything all that is, like, just please fix me. And it is, I think you're spot on when you say that, like, it doesn't, nothing, I think you were talking about science, really. It doesn't matter if you don't have the faith or the hope, to the intuition to start with. Like, the people that in this lifetime are going to like have the ease are the ones that somehow have those like unteachable soft skills of like, well, can you trust? And that's really hard to, like, that's a hard lesson for anyone to get to, period. No matter what kind of training you go through or whatever, it's really hard.
I think it's an exercise. And I think that you cannot gain anything without experience. You can't gain trust. You cannot gain confidence. It is an exercise. It is a practice. And so I know you and I have talked about this, about having certain students that are like, I'm going to practice 15 minutes a day and then, knock it out. But that's not what it is, ultimately. And what I teach, I know this is what you teach, but for me specifically, when I teach students, all of my different students have something amazing about them.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And I'm giving you like this box, but like, put your toys in the box. I want you to like trust in yourself, in your gifts. So like, I have one devotee of Santa Muerte. I have one who like channels like automatic writing. I have, different people with different things. And I'm like, you need to marry that with the thing that I'm giving you. And whoever your other teachers are, that's the key, because we just had this conversation today. We need new ideas. We need fresh ideas. We don't need this like continuous harmonization. Like, this is how we keep harmony, is like not like flipping tables. Flip some freaking tables. Like, do something different. Have some haters. Like, I think that that's really important, because people like, you know, I'm not a huge tarot, like that's not my preferred modality, but
Right.
that's the Fool. You have that
Yeah.
divine eminence. You have to look like a fool for
Yeah.
a while before
Yeah.
people are like, dang, you're a magician.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
Yeah. The Fool is the sweet spot. It's to me, it's exactly where we want to be. So let's talk about the Fool and trance channeling. um, so your your like most current direction is taking you into the world of becoming a channel. And it you know, from the time when I first met you, which has now been a couple of years ago, this was, you know, like you were certainly like had an awareness of your mediumship abilities. You had an awareness of like the ability to just connect. Can you talk about one, what is channeling? Because I feel like it's
Sure.
out there, but people don't truly know what it means.
Yeah,
Like we always say, like, oh, I
no.
channeled it or it's channeled. And then also like your journey to accepting this into your life has been a little bit challenging. And I want to know, first of all, what it is, and then what has your journey been to get to this moment of channeling?
Sure. So, yes, I think channeling has become hot and not everything is channeling. Channeling, I've been a channel for a very long time. Channeling is very separate than psychic mediumship. So,
Mm.
in psychic mediumship, you have your clairs, right? You're knowing, you're hearing, you're feeling, like all of that. That's how most people are being talking to. Channeling, you are having, there's a complete other conversation going on that you are a witness to,
Mm.
which is very different. It's a weird thing. And honestly, that is what put me, that's why I had like a mental breakdown and went into a mental hospital for 2 days and had to talk the psychoanalyst into letting me out. And that was
Yeah.
hard. Um,
Yeah.
because when you hear another voice happening and you're talking separate to this voice and they're giving you answers that is nothing to do with your brain, it's terrifying. And
Yeah.
maybe it's not terrifying for all people, but like I'm going to honor the fact that I was terrified and I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um but I was lucky enough to have somebody tell me you are channeling. And
Yeah.
over time it was just what it was. Like that's how I get my information. And
Yeah.
you can kind of feel it you could kind of feel it so separately than psychic. Like if I'm doing a psychic reading and I have a knowing or a feeling, I'm being psychic right now. But if somebody is talking to me, then I'm channeling.
Yeah.
And then I would say right around the time you and I met, like 3 years ago, is when I got really into automatic writing.
Yeah.
And so basically, like I don't know what's coming out of my hand. Um, it's coming out, or sometimes someone's talking to me and I'm writing it out. It
Right.
just really depends on like who I'm working with. These aren't my guides. These are sometimes they're my guides, but sometimes they're like guides for the moment or for that
Yeah.
time that I
Yeah.
need. Um Now with trance and possession, I have had instances when I was younger where it just happened.
Right.
I had a roommate when I was 16. She came home, her father had passed. And I guess I sat up and I spoke to her as her father
Mm.
and I called her by names that only her father called her. And it just happened. Um, and it happened to me a couple of times when I was a teenager, like near graveyards, where my friends were like,
Yeah.
"What are you talking about? Who are you?" You know, and then it just got weird. I didn't know what I was doing. But as I honed in on my gifts and I'm doing the automatic writing, um, I do notice sometimes when I'm giving someone advice or I'm just talking to somebody, I get really fuzzy
Mm.
and it's almost like this isn't me talking and I know. There it's like fuzzy and I kind of feel high.
Yeah.
And I found out later that was me like blending. So during my pregnancy with Sloan, I kept going back to these like mediumship circles, the spiritualists. You and I think we even talked about it in a reading once. And I was like, what's this about?
Yeah.
Because it didn't feel like though, people have come in and out in readings with me, I don't feel drawn to mediumship. It's
Right.
just, I'm not interested in it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not my thing. That's fine. There's a lot of mediums out there. So there's really
Right.
good mediums. But I realized that I needed to, after I wrote half of my book, I needed to research trance.
Yeah.
And it just was something that came through. And I was like, I'm going to do it. So I looked up like trance channeling, which there's like barely anything out there. Trance mediumship, there is, but it's highly centered around trance mediumship. And then it can go into the other stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know. I also found like auditory induced trance and ritual body postures, which is a anthropic way of looking at the different statues in the past
Oh, wow.
and doing the same movements. And this woman, Felicitas Goodman, she's from Germany. She's now passed. She did like all this research, and it's like pretty incredible. And there's an institute in the Southwest. It's Kuyamanga, and that's just what they do.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I don't like, for me, not really for me, but there's some aspects of it that do help amplify and in certain positions.
Yeah.
And through auditory and their research, I've learned like the sweet spot of like waves in your brain or beats per minute.
Right.
And anyway, so and now I'm voyeuring into traditional trance mediumship with somebody out of the UK, which I'm really excited about. But
Yeah.
it's talk about my dreams. When we were going through that teacher training with Helen, I don't know about you, I'm sure, but for me, that was an insane year of attunement process. And I don't think I think attunement is clickbait. It's like, oh, you get attuned. But like
Yeah.
people don't talk about how fucked up attunement is.
Yeah.
Like it will
Yeah.
make you one of my students texted me and was like, yep, I threw up. And I'm like, you don't feel
Yeah.
good, and it
Yeah.
does alter your reality. And
Yeah.
the work that I do, I'm very clear that, hey, like, do you have resources? Because this is hard. Um,
Yeah.
during that time I had that, I also lost my grandmother. I had postpartum. We're coming out of COVID, so I have my agoraphobic tendencies were
Yeah.
at their height.
You
And
moved.
I moved like 3
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
um I through a reader, she recommended I turn off my dream portal, which for me is hard to do, but I did it. And one night I'm in bed, I'm aware I'm in bed, but I'm in that stage, and I see like this like crystalline palace like in the sky, and there's this sense of like home, and there's this sense of like this looks familiar to me, but it was almost like galactic. It wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't like heaven
Yeah.
or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then I saw myself in myself, but really pulled back. And there was this other being speaking, and every time it tried to force my mouth open, my daughter's home, every time it tried to force my mouth open, I was like resisting.
Yeah.
And it would try to say something in English, but this like language would pour out, and I could see the being getting frustrated. And then finally, I look and I see this book, and it says, "We are the messengers, the 3, the 5, the 9." And I feel it come through, and it says it out my mouth. And as it says it, it wakes me up. And I like grab my husband, and I'm like, Steve, like freaking out because this is crazy. I jump up. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is crazy. Like this really happened. This fucking happened. Wait a second. I don't like this. Do I like this? Like I'm like
Yeah.
losing it because it's just so unreal. for like 2 years, I searched everywhere. What does this mean? Who's the 3, the 5, the 9? Who's whatever? I don't know. Actually, it was a woman in Scotland who was like, could you be the messenger of the 3, the 5, the 9? And I was like, that is interesting. Okay. But I didn't know what 359 was. And so I like looked up longitudes, latitudes. I looked up like sacred numbers, gematria. Like I could not figure this out. It wasn't until I started doing this trance channeling that they started coming through. So for 2 years, I knew about this, but I didn't know what it was. And that's who started coming out. And so it's interesting because you were like, you asked for this. And that night I wrote down, I asked for this. Looking back at my notes, because I keep notes of every single thing since 2017, 2018. And what they explained is that they are the frequency of prosperity, but that we don't even understand what prosperity means. Like we don't even know the potential of prosperity. And from what my understanding is so far, because I'm mostly still trying to calibrate my body to their energy, which is a whole thing. But from my understanding so far is that they're bringing this message of trust, of trust yourself and aligning into like taking chances aligns you into a state of flow. So doing the hard stuff, it's not about lessons learned and all of this stuff. It's about what you have and how much that affects the world around you. Which is essentially like what I already talk about, but you know, these energies when you're channeling, they aggregate to a frequency that's close to them as well. So it makes sense. They are, I don't know, Leah, why don't you tell people what you experienced? I did it in front of Leah.
I mean, it was a true, genuine experience of observing a total marriage with this entity or whatever you call it. Like it was fully embodied within you. It was just, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I don't have a lot of experience with trance channels, but I have some, and it was exactly what I've seen, but in a specific relationship. And I think that's like what's cool about getting into this is that it's going to, like, whatever entity is channeled through a human being, that is like a co-creative relationship. It's so if the 359 wanted to be channeled by somebody else, what would emerge would be different than what is emerging through Sophia, because it's a relationship, and it's kind of like, I think it's interesting that you can choose a teacher for channeling, because I think you absolutely should have somebody who's gone through it to help guide you, but all they can do is tell you like how to prepare your body or how to be, you know, they can't tell you what's going to happen, because what's going to happen is completely emergent between you and whoever you're working with. And I think that's it was so evident that that's what's happening. When I observed you, when I watched you channel, one of the things that's fascinating to me that I kind of wanted to talk about, and I also want to like, I think we've been doing this for a minute too, so we should probably like wind it up, but
wrap it up, B.
But like, I watched you resist this for a while and then come into a fearful state of acceptance, and then watching you like the fear dissipate a lot. And now there's like an excitement, even though you're going into the unknown, you're clearly excited, and it feels resonant. Like this is such a good example of resonance, because like I've known from the jump, I've had people tell me, you are a medium, you can do this, you could channel. And my immediate knee-jerk reaction is, hell no, I don't want to see it. don't come in my body, don't nothing. I don't want to, I don't want to get woozy when I'm near the energies, like block it off. I could do Akashic, I could see it in my mind's eye, that's fine. Let me be claircognizant until I die. But I don't want that visceral experience of being in contact because it's too scary for me. And so, like, to see you excitedly say yes to it is a clear demonstration of resonance. It's a yes.
Yeah.
And yeah. So where I want to know, like, you don't know what's going to happen, but where do you feel like you're going with this?
Well, I think you kind of touched on something like, you know, when I was pregnant and I closed my books, which I've done many times. In my work, I'm continuously evolving and I'm not hiding from that. Um,
Yeah.
my work changes as I change, and I don't think there's anything more authentic than that. So like when I shut down, I shut down. It sucks I don't make any money, but like I think that's important. Okay. Sorry, she's whispering. Um, and on top of that, I have a family. So like
Yeah.
how do I marry my relationship and my profession, right? Because my profession is a huge part of my relationship. Um, so when I was pregnant, I closed my books and then I was like talking to Leah all the time. Like I was going through it. I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know how I'm gonna proceed. I don't know what's out there. And then when I started getting momentum, I was going through the process of EDMR, which is like it will break you down a little bit before you get built back up. I was really struggling with my confidence and what I have and like what do I have to offer and like who am I and
Yeah.
you know and it's crazy. I was just talking about this with my husband like 2-3 months ago. I was a mess. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know where my confidence went. I don't know where anything went. And now I am like excited. I am
Yeah.
stoked. I'm so excited to be teaching.
Yeah.
I
You're
love my
filled with
students. Like
ideas coming to
I am
you.
like, yes, I am like, there are too many ideas coming out of me, just
Yeah.
pouring out of me. And like, I'm, I'm like loving my relationship with my students. Like I
Yeah.
am loving, I had like two dreams 2 nights ago and both dreams I was like writing down my attributes and both of them I was like nurturing is a big one.
Yeah.
But like I'm loving that. And I think a lot of that is connecting with this energy. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's as much as I'm giving it a mouthpiece, it's giving me a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have never been this lit up about what
Yeah.
I'm doing. I've never felt so strongly about like what I'm teaching, what I'm going to be like offering. I think what I'm working towards is being able to anchor them long enough so that I can give lectures or
Yeah.
have people ask them directly.
Yeah.
Because when I did the few circles that I've done, um it's definitely more intense than when I do it at home,
Yeah.
alone. And like when I shut down and I read people, it's like reading on steroids. It's like
Yeah.
insane, like insane the stuff that I
Yeah.
pull. And
Yeah.
then I close my laptop and I am like I mean, I have it now. Like my face is red. Like I'm happy, I'm joyful, I'm
Yeah.
excited. And so I want to continue to do that. Like this
Yeah.
feels good.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working towards, and we'll just see what happens. To me, I think that this is what I think. I think for a lot of us being called to this work, we've always been outliers. We've always been isolated. We've
Yeah.
always like struggled to find our people. I think that's on purpose. I
Yeah.
think that's because we are emerging new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are becoming leaders in thought, in opportunities and in pathways. Like we are helping the world see different perspectives. We are bringing the Akasha to the world.
Yeah.
And so every person that I meet and I interact with who has felt like that, I'm like, you need to be loved
Yeah.
because you have something. And I also feel that people that have gone through it, when you deal with challenges on that level, then like dealing with stuff that's really uncomfortable, it's a practice. It becomes easier. And when you can like move through that, like that, plastic wrap and get through, then it's just joyous and it's flow and it's resonance. And it's like, it's totally worth it because you're like,
Yeah.
I've been fucked before. Like, how bad can this hurt?
Yeah.
I've lost my mind and been locked up before. How bad
Yeah.
can this hurt?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that a lot of us get stuck in that past and we look at it as like, oh man, I need to heal this and that and the other. And so we get stuck in this cycle and people make money off of us. But
Yeah.
if you like take a moment and go like, I'm not stuck in the past. That was a resource. I need to move forward and be okay with it and find what makes you okay with it. It is powerful. And I really hope that people can see that and learn that. And that's what I feel like I'm here to do. And that's what I think that the 359 is going to help me do.
So I think that's such great wisdom for anybody that's like trying to figure out what they're doing in this field or others. Like it's just that's such good it's a good perspective. What is coming up for you that people could participate in? Like what do you have planned? Or is that on pause until you what's going on?
No, too many ideas. Okay. So I have my exploring the Akasha. That is going to be a 6-week course. And we're gonna do the Akasha not my way, but your way. Like not your way, but their way. Like we're not going into this as this is the Akashic Records certification.
Like a dogma. Yeah.
It's not a dogma. But what I am going to do in this class is this is for people that feel like they're drawn to the Akasha. The Akashic Records feels too limiting, maybe a little too new agey, and they want to explore the abyss. They want to push their limits. That's what that class is.
Yeah.
That starts January 17th. There's going to be an application process for that, not just to make sure that you have resources for the attunement process, but also I want to hear from the students. I want to know like what you want to learn, what you need help with, so that I can help you, maybe get out of your head a little bit or whatever. I want to build for my students as well.
Yeah.
So if you subscribe to my email list, you get the application last week in November. It's open for everyone else in December. We start January 17th. I also have a journey through the archetypes. It is a Kabbalistic Akashic journey through the major arcana. So it's a 22-week thing, but this is probably my most accessible class. It's a $15 drop-in every Sunday for 22 weeks. We're starting January 7th because it's, I don't know, let's start with the full at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah. I love that.
But if you book the whole thing, it's only $10 a class. So it's basically an hour every Sunday. We work through the Hebraic value and key of each major arcana, and we do an Akashic practice with it. And I think what it's really great for, it changed my life. It's really great for setting the tone for your week, recognizing that archetype, not just in yourself, but as it reacts in your life. And I think it really hones in your understanding of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And also seeing that it is in you, that you have this ability.
Yeah.
I am going to release the Akashic readership. That's going to be a 12-week program. And that is not only just readership, it's in the same vein. Like we're pushing the limits of how you understand this, but also, best practices. And also helping guide the people you are reading. Because I don't think there's enough of that.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So I might offer decoding again. There's a lot of stuff. There's one, it's like the power of possibility where they want to do drop-ins and also like pushing the limits for practitioners. But I think I'm going to start doing the trance circles on a more larger level. I'm planning on going to Philly in February. I'm planning LA for March.
Yeah.
See where else it takes me. I think I'm
Yeah.
going to like Sonoma in September or something like
Cool.
that. So I'm coming out a lot next year.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
And then,
Yeah,
so
so
where do
go ahead.
people engage with you? Instagram, email, like website? How do you want that to happen?
Yeah, Instagram at Divine Void Sophia. You can always send me an email. I love talking to people. You can always send me a DM. I love talking to
Yeah.
people. You can always listen to this podcast. I love talking to people.
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
oh, yes. And so exploring the Akasha, I will say initially I said it was for beginners and intermediate. I think it's more for intermediates or people who have taken an Akasha class or have practiced on their own to have
Yeah.
some sort of start point.
Yeah.
Um, not like brand new, like,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
My students would be good for that because they spent a whole year with me. They're pretty advanced practitioners at this point, but they have taken something, and some of them are looking for more of like how to, I don't know. I'm gonna pass it on to them.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, I feel like we got a really good fleshed out picture of Sophia and what she does. Is there anything else, Sophia, that you feel like we haven't touched on that you want to talk about or that you want to mention, or
Not that I can
okay.
think of.
A little bit of trivia is that Sophia is a big Christmas person and we're getting into her season. So I just want to give that heads up in case if I just feel like you should tease people with little Instagram stories of your house
Oh
and
my
your
God.
life.
Like Christmas till I die. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to Dollywood for like this is
Yeah.
here's the thing. So everyone that does know me or has heard, I have a very close relationship to my grandmother who's now passed. She always made Christmas so magical for me. And that was like the only time that like something felt special. And tell me why this bitch had to die Christmas Eve.
Ugh, why do they do that?
But yeah, I get really, I mean, the whole, like, I thought about buying a Christmas shower curtain the other day. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even care how chuggy, like, I get into it. I
I
get
bought
into it.
I bought eggnog before Halloween happened. Like
Yeah,
it
same.
was there.
It's in my coffee. Drink it
Go to
every morning.
hell. Come and don't at me, bro. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
major
I
Christmas
I
person.
love that. I just want to throw that in there. But okay. I think this has been so lovely. And I hope that we do follow-ups to this to see how your trance pathway like unfolds because it's so exciting to watch.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, if people
Maybe
get a chance.
maybe
Yeah.
we could do a trance on the podcast.
Down. 100% down. Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me continue to calibrate.
Yeah.
It is getting much better. Oh, that's the other thing. Okay, my bad. I am posting these transmissions on YouTube,
Yeah.
on the YouTube.
Yeah.
Um, I just posted one. It's still, you know, you can tell like I'm still getting it. There's a lot of long pauses,
Yeah.
but like here's the thing. That's the process is not pretty. And I
Yeah.
think it needs to be authentic and I don't want to adulter their what they have to say. So
Yeah.
if you can be patient, I think I'm going to try to get captions on these videos moving forward. But my goal is to do one once a week, if not more.
Yeah. Is it on this channel where people can watch the YouTube podcast of
Yes.
us? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope people check that out. It's really incredible, and I hope people feel connected to you and your trance work. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for sharing so much of yourself with us. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
y'all. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening.
Like and
Um,
subscribe.
like and subscribe. We have a Patreon.
Rate
It's a
us.
basically it's $5. It's just to say keep doing what y'all are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.